Wholeness, welcome. This is Josh of Inner Skilled, and today I have Kevin Roth with me. Kevin, what's happening?
Oh, everything and nothing.
Yeah,
That's a
that's a
quantum physics response.
there we go. That's fair enough. So, who is Kevin Roth, and what kind of work does he do?
Oh man, who is Kevin Roth? I've been wondering that my entire life. But in the world, in the dream world we live in, I'm a musician. I play the dulcimer, that's what I'm known for. I have a whole bunch of record albums and sang on PBS TV. I had on a hit TV show for kids called Shining Time Station. And I was doing I do podcasts almost every day. I'm interviewed almost every day, and this guy ran off a litany of my career, and it was like I thought to myself, God, all that happened in spite of yourself. There was a lot of stuff I did, but around 2016, I became what I call a practical spiritual life coach based on the fact that I had been diagnosed 2 years prior with stage 3 melanoma and told by three oncologists I only had 2 years to live. And I knew they were wrong, and they were. But it was certainly what I call a spiritual kick in the ass, and I had to redo my life. I had to reorganize my life, and I had to say, okay, what gave you cancer was stress and inflammation. And if you want to die, keep it up. And if you want to change your life, uh, let's talk about what that is and let's do it. And it's real simple. And then at the suggestion of a friend, he said, why don't you become a life coach and teach people what you did that worked? So the reason I call myself a practical spiritual life coach is because I'm not into, pardon the expression, the woo-woo bullshit. I teach only from what I've experienced and what I believe to be true. And it includes music, because with the dulcimer, from going to be a folk singer or singer-songwriter, I developed something called Dulci meditation. And I'll demonstrate what that is for you a little bit later on. And it helps bring people into a more quiet space. And if they don't play the dulcimer, there's other ways to do it. So now I'm not on the road. I'm not really in the music business, but I occasionally put out something new musically or a book or something, and I include tracks. But I'm really, I think it's vitally important that I'm doing what I'm doing, because every day there's more and more need for it.
Well, lovely and wonderful. Yeah, there's three main things that pop out to me here. I'm interested in the kind of the music aspect of it, especially the musical business and career, if you don't mind me asking about that, because I don't run into too many people who have gone to kind of your higher level there. And then we've got the cancer journey, and then we've got yeah, the meditation aspect of that, which I'm more familiar with, but not with the musical things. Oh, we're getting a little bit of feedback here. Okay, it seems okay. So I don't know where you want to start with the what. Well, let's just start with I think the most pressing thing here is cancer. I mean, I what I'm interested in just is I've heard more and more people talk about the emotional link to cancer. Do you know what I'm talking about? Can you speak to that? Because I don't know where to start or to I don't know how to phrase this, but you might know what I'm talking about.
Well, it's very frightening. When you're given sort of either a death sentence, or you know that you're going to have to do something like chemo or something like that, which I didn't. But cancer is like something hasn't gone haywire in your cells, and it's in your body, and you don't have any control of it for the general sense. I mean, that you do in a certain sense. And that would be that you can change your diet, and you can, um, you know, go whatever route that you feel is good medically, emotionally, physically, or spiritually with it. And I know people who've cured themselves without any of that, um, any chemo. There's a website called Chris Beat Cancer, where he talks only about nutrition and meditation. And I personally know people that have gone from stage 4 to nothing. So it messes with your head because emotionally everything is upside down.
I guess I meant more of the cause, like the emotional link to maybe the
Oh,
causes of cancer,
yeah.
and I don't know if there's anything to that or not, but
Oh, a big, yes, definitely. So it's scientifically proven that stress and inflammation causes illness. So if you're really stressed out and you have a lot of inflammation in your body, either through overeating or whatever causes inflammation for you, that causes illness. It's just it's a scientific medical fact. And I was very stressed out for about 4 or 5 years before, I was diagnosed. Um, and I just changed all that. I changed my diet and I changed the way I saw myself. And from running a record company and booking concerts and being under the stress of the music business, which is a very stressful business if it's your whole business. And I'm not talking about just playing a gig on a weekend, to have some fun. I just downsized my life. I said I'm going to move to San Diego, California, and be a bohemian. I'm going to give up all this other stuff. I'm going to get rid of my credit card debts. I'm going to do, all the stuff that made me unhappy. But the funny thing emotionally about this stuff is that the stuff that makes you sick is the river that you're used to running on. So you need to make a new path, a different stream, because for a lot of people, when they're emotionally crazed and it gets them ill, when they're ill, they go back to what they've been doing when they're emotionally crazed because they think it makes you feel better. So at least for me, I gained a lot of weight because food was my addiction at that time, and whatever else, I did. So that was the wrong thing to do, but it's what we do naturally until you wake up and you say, okay, this is how I'm going to do it. And if I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down my way. And that's it.
I
One,
think
one,
this is a really challenging one for guys, at least in my experience. We're not raised to talk about emotions. That's the traditional male thing is, oh, that's kind of weak, or that's for women. And we get together and hang out. The last, at least in my experience with my guy friends, we don't really. I mean, now more than used to, but that's not really even on the radar. How to talk about emotions and things. I mean, glad I have my partner. It's a little bit easier, and but it's just like it's hard to have a reference point for this. And like, yeah, you mentioned there. I think if maybe I'm being too general here, but a lot of us have our go-to maybe vice or outlet or coping mechanism for dealing with really intense emotions, and some of them are healthier than others. But yeah, you brought up a good point about that, and I'm just very fortunate. I haven't gone through this cancer journey. I have a couple of friends that have, but yeah, and I appreciate you pointing out the fact that there are so many other alternatives than the standard cookie cutter approach that most people are handed with, right? So I'm not deriding that. I'm just saying there are a lot of options out there that maybe a lot of people don't know about too. And there's a lot involved in it apparently too. Not just the medical aspect or the emotional aspect, but I would imagine, yeah, like you're saying, the environmental factors and maybe even heredity. It's beyond my pay grade. But yeah, if you want to say just a little bit more before we go on to the next topic.
well, in other parts of the world, they have cancer treatments which are non-toxic. They have when they use, I believe it's uh, laser with water or something that breaks up the cells naturally and absorb. But here in America, you got pharmaceutical companies that don't want you to know about that stuff. But then it could be that here in America, people are starting to use it. I don't know because once I was clear, I don't really dive back into that world. But there are alternatives, and there is hope if anyone listening has cancer. There's lots of ways to deal with it. So If you want to go a natural route and try it, if you, I'll tell you the truth. Number one, you have to like your oncologist. You have to trust the doctor you're working with. And most of them, I find, having been through four of them, don't really know what they're talking about. I mean, they have a vague idea. You want to find a doctor that is compassionate, that listens to you, uh, who has good reviews, and who you connect with, because he's going to be your assistance in healing. On the spiritual side of it, whether it's Jesus or Buddha or whatever, you need a spiritual connection, because this human form ain't really what's going on. We can talk about that later. But in brief, spiritually, all the spiritual teachers, Jesus and whatever, said the world's an illusion, and quantum physics says exactly the same thing. Nothing exists. So you need some sort of spiritual root, because when the body dies, where does it go? And if you watch a lot of near-death experience, like I do, because I think they're really fascinating, and these are people who have died, some of them are doctors and lawyers, and they all say the same thing. It's an absolutely beautiful thing. You're merged with this source, and it's full of love. I don't think anyone would want to choose that, but knowing that and knowing the things that I know, I'm not afraid of death, and I don't have a choice, right? I just don't want to have to go suffering, which is another reason I live in California, because, if it ever got to that point, it's legal to have assisted help with that kind of stuff. It's in Kansas, where I used to live, you can't get it. You couldn't get assisted help. You could get a gun and blow your brains out, which I think is like absurd, that you can't do one or the other. But it's that it nothing is a straight line. So there's a lot. It's like a tree that has a lot of branches, and you have to trust your gut. So find a good doctor that you like, even if you're healthy. Find a good physician, a good nutritionist, a good something, meditation, a good life coach, or whatever it is, if you feel that you need to go in that direction. Have faith in something, because it's all one thing anyway. And then keep your life really simple. Keep your life simple. There was a point in my music career where I wanted to be rich and famous, and I got there for about 2 minutes. And I lost a lot of the money because of the stock market bust. And I had a $500,000 house, all that stuff. Does not matter. Does not matter. I wrote a book a few years ago called Between the Notes. And in it, I was talking about standing across the street from a taco stand here in San Diego. And there were four Mexican workers with a taco and a beer. And they were laughing, just laughing their asses off. They were having the best time. And not far from them was a guy in a business suit on a cell phone screaming at someone in one hand with a taco in the other. And I was thinking, I don't know how much money this fancy guy makes, but I'd rather be in the framework of the Mexican guys who, are missing teeth, and they don't look rich. Of course, I know a lot of people who are rich that look like bums, to be honest with you. My cousin's one of them. But, you have the right to be happy. Unfortunately, for a lot of us, you have to hit a wall. You have to hit bottom. That's why things like AA, if you have trouble with alcohol or overeating, 12-step program is a great program. I know a lot of people that have been in it, because you gotta believe in something, I think, because that's what you are.
You raise the kind of the most fundamental points of all this. We've got happiness, we've got stress. So that's like nothing really else matters, like you say, if the stress and pain, unsatisfactoriness, even on the subtle layers, this word dukkha that the Buddha told everybody about, stress, suffering is a little bit hard word, but it's real, and you've experienced, I've experienced, but even on a daily basis, stress, which you illustrated there, but even more subtle than that, unsatisfactoriness. So yeah, so that's the thing. And is it just the worldly kind of happiness and stress, or is there a chance to go beyond even that? So, yeah, I mean, the Mexicans and they're both going to end up dead, right? So like, what's their level? So yeah, we can get into about that, but yeah, it is absolutely fundamental. And I do want to push back just a little bit about the what's now being labeled compassionate suicide, basically. And on the surface, I can kind of see it, if somebody's really in a lot of pain. But what I've heard in Switzerland, all you need is two doctors to declare you not you, but in the royal, two doctors to declare legal sanity, and then they can go in these little suicide pods and off themselves. So to me, it's very dangerous. On the surface, it seems, oh
Mm.
yeah, they can do it with in a legal system, but it's not like that. If we dig a little bit deeper, that person could just be having a bad day, you know, and it could have been over in a week, or they could have some event change their life, and then, and in my experience, it's not that easy. At least if I'm extrapolating, the lessons keep repeating in my life until I've learned them, right? So just because I think I can get out of it easily by off, I just don't feel it's that easy, because where we end up next, that lesson is still going to be there to be learned, right? And that's, I would say, really bad karma. And to normalize that, I feel, is a really dangerous thing, because it's just like a eugenic thing. With people with bad intentions, they can promote this as normality, and then they could brainwash people to just say, oh, it's just easier if you kill yourself, get out of it that way. In my experience, it could be a very dangerous, slippery slope. Now, if you know all the consequences of our actions and the intentionality and the outcome is guaranteed, then we could say different. But I don't know those, so it's safer for me to practice non-harming and myself too. So that's just my scope on this, and I'm open to hearing otherwise. But I'm a big adherence to non-harming, and yeah, because of the when we think, speak, and act with intention, it's going to have consequences,
Yeah.
be they skillful or otherwise. So I just wanted to throw that back at you to see if you have anything to say about that.
Yeah. The assisting or whatever they call it out here, you have to really be physically, really, really sick. I mean, stage 4, and there's just nothing medically or scientifically that a doctor could say that's going to make things get any better. And it's just, you could pump them up, I guess, with drugs until people die, and. But it's you would have to. I What you say, I think, is true, and I would never choose that as an option, because it's not easy to get done. I mean, there's a lot of paperwork, and you've got to have, you got to go through a whole checklist of things. It's not like someone's just going to come in and give you a shot and you're dead. It's I know someone who went through something like this, and it's a long process. And in this particular case, there's a lot of things a lot of checklists for this particular thing. But there are other people who don't believe in that, and then they go into a hospice and they're made comfortable. So I don't know what that means. Um, my whole thing is I just want to be comfortable. I'm not worried. It doesn't bother me about death. I just want to be comfortable. And for me personally, if the only way I could be comfortable, that there was no drugs they could give me until I died, I'd say, let's get it over with. Because if I'm not going to be improving, not even a chance of it. But that's an area I haven't really gone into. Um, I,
It, it
I think personally, I would absolutely know. And I don't think I would ever choose I don't think I'd ever have to choose that. I don't see my leaving the planet that way.
it's a really sensitive topic, and we could be careful here because of just all the different things involved. But for me, it seems like a psychological safety mechanism.
Hmm.
That if somebody thinks, oh, I wouldn't choose, but I have that option if it ever
Mm.
really got that bad, and then I could do it in a socially acceptable manner. You know what I mean? So I want to, so it's understandable in some sense to me if that's the case, that there's always some kind of out if it got too horrendous, and I'm so sorry, on a some level, it kind of makes sense like that, um, but to me, there's a little bit of a cognitive dissonance if I really say that I'm not afraid of dying. That's got to apply on all circumstances. You know what I mean? But then the compassionate side of me says, gosh, I don't want anybody go through any kind of pain, stress, and
Mhm.
suffering too. So it's a tough one. It's a cognitive dissonance as well. So, but and it's you know it's just so this life is a life of pain and tears. It can be very beautiful too, but this is why, again, we'll just bring it back to the fundamentals: this knowing of stress, suffering, and unsatisfactoriness, and knowing it in order to have it end in the best way, so in the most skillful, heartful way. I think that's the work to me, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
We would choose hospice.
mm.
That's what I would personally choose. But there, I think the bigger point and the major point is that we can avoid a lot of illnesses and suffering by recognizing what is stressing us out. So
Oh, absolutely.
if you have a
Yes.
lot of if you owe a lot of money and and you're owe more than you're making, I'm telling you, it is a beautiful experience to downsize. It's wonderful. I live in a 500 square foot apartment. The only thing I'm a little crazy about, obsessive, are dulcimers. I've got a lot of them because I collect them. I love it. But other people, they like having a big house, and if you can afford it, whatever it is. But however it comes, whether it's in a relationship or stress or however it comes, there are things we can do like diet, exercise, and sleep. Those are the three big things. And then being honest with yourself and
Yeah.
saying, when a new client comes to me, and we have an initial conversation to discuss whether we want to work together, the first question I ask them is, what don't you want in your life anymore? And sometimes they're not clear on that. They say, well, I don't want credit card debt, but I have to. And I just stop. I said, forget the buts. Just what don't you want? And then I say, now what do you want? And then we create a path. And that's why I love doing what I do, because I'm successful at it because I've done it. And I work with people and show them that when they run into situations they think are impossible, and I'll tell you a really funny story. I was thinking about this the other day. I had a client, and it was around Thanksgiving, and I asked her, what are you going to do for Thanksgiving? She said, oh, I got to go to my damn in-laws. So she says, they never liked me. I was never good enough for their son. I never liked them. I said, well, then why are you going? She says, because it's Thanksgiving, we have to go. I said, well, why don't you tell your husband you don't want to go? You'll stay home. You're good. You'll send some food, or you'll have a pie when he gets home, and see what he says. Oh, he'll never go for that. No way. Long story short, I said, look, I'm a man, and I know that if there's any way to get out of drama quick, I'm there. So she told her husband, she says, I don't want to go this year. You go and tell him I'm whatever. And he said, okay. And she's not a client anymore, but my clients become like family, so we keep in touch. And every Thanksgiving, she opens a can of soup and she plays her dulcimer, and she does some other things that are fun I won't mention. And her husband goes with his family, and it's great. I just think so. It's those kinds of things, recognize that you don't need pressure in your life. There's enough, especially these days. So simplify.
And that analogy of debt, the literal debt, I know how freeing that is, not having debt. And That's more important to me than having a bunch of stuff or, whatever. It's a huge burden off, right?
Oh
But
yeah.
that metaphor can be applied to so many things, like you just mentioned there, this family social debt that that's like weighing down. It's huge to just say, oh, I don't actually have to pick that up. I can just leave it. There's no requirement. Yeah, it can be life changing, game changing, can it?
Oh yeah.
So why don't we? I think this would be a good take a little bitty kind of maybe mini break and just hear you play Dulcimer. Yeah, and you can say anything about it before and after if you'd like to.
Well, the dulcimer is the only American folk instrument. So it's related to European instruments, but in the form that we have it. It's an American folk instrument. And in the 60s, dulcimer players like Gene Ritchie and a couple other traditional folk people who lived in the Appalachian Mountains brought it down to Greenwich Village in the folk scene and began to make it popular. In the 70s, there was a whole wave of different kind of dulcimer players, innovative ones. And I was one of them, and I had a record deal. So when you went to buy a record album of dulcimer music, I was one that you could find. And the reason I got well known in it is because I had an innovative style, because I didn't know that there was a way to play it like the folk singers were doing. And that was basically, and this is why I have this dulcimer, playing a dulcimer that looks like this. So these frets are, except for that one long one, is under only the melody strings. I don't know how close I can get. Yeah, there we go. And so you can't do fancy chording. So it sounds like this. This is what traditional playing would sound like. Very simple. And the modern dulcimers are a lot like guitars in the sense that they're mostly fully fretted diatonically. And you can plug them in and they come in all shapes and sizes. But this is what a traditional dulcimer looks like. So when I started to play dulcimer, there was nothing that said I couldn't learn to play Somewhere Over the Rainbow on it or Dr. Zhivago or jazz. So I did, and I pissed off a lot of traditional dulcimer players who said, it's not the way you play our Dulcimer. And I just was doing what I was doing. So, and that's how my career happened. But with all the fancy schmancy stuff that I've done on the dulcimer, I usually come back to this very traditional dulcimer itself. It was built by a friend of mine who just passed away, Ron Ewing. And it's just so simple. It's like, if you slow it down, it's what I call dulce meditation. So, so you can see in the simplest form, it's really beautiful. So what dulce meditation is that when you play the dulcimer very, very simply and you don't read the music and you don't look at anything on the paper, you more or less lullaby yourself. What that does is it gives you an opportunity to listen to your inner voice. So the question I ask is, what do I need to know? Now, when you're playing the music, the mind goes for the music. The monkey mind child goes, listens to the music. So it leaves the room and it concentrates on the music. And scientifically, there's a whole explanation for healing in music, which gives you the opportunity as the bigger parent of yourself to ask, what do I need to know while the child's playing? And from my experience, either nothing comes up or something comes up out of the blue. So I was doing Dulce meditation this morning and I was thinking, what do I need to know? And I was working with a client before you. And what popped into my head is, you have this podcast coming up, because I was thinking about what I was going to do something today. And I thought, oh my God, I have this podcast. It was more about the shirt I'm going to wear so that it will match the paint. But that's what happens. What's in the background comes forward. And it could be anything from you need to chill out, or once it was go get flowers for yourself, which was a really weird one. And I didn't know why, but I knew to follow it. And while I was getting flowers, I realized on the way home, or when I got home really, that all the craziness and things going on in my head that I was concerned about had disappeared. So I trust the inner voice. And Dulce meditation is one of the ways that I play the dulcimer for that.
That's so beautiful, and I can just confirm that time and time again. When I ignore my intuition, I end up paying the price for that. You know what I mean? Like the mind can override that sometimes, but we never want to really ignore those inner messages we get. And I also want to say that I can confirm in my 20s, before I even got in all this stuff and had a formal meditation practice like traditional or whatever, I listen to so much music. I don't have a musical ability in me, but I am very appreciative of so many different areas of music genres. And it was my life in my 20s. Almost constantly while I was awake, I was listening to something new. And I always liked to listen to things I had never heard before and would seek out very niche genres in European avant-garde stuff and sound experimentation, blah, 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 on and on. But I would just sit there and listen, and it would give the kind of chaotic thinking mind a break. Or like you're saying, the monkey mind will gravitate to that. It's almost compelled to take the attention to it, and that gives the relief. Before I started doing mind training and heart training, right? Such a beautiful practice, and it goes on from there, like you're saying. And I thank you for sharing this technique you talked about of asking that question. I'll do that in my standard meditation from time to time, or out when in nature. But it's so lovely and beautiful to know that this is possible for musicians too, and I'd imagine on the listener side as well. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I see. I can't just do traditional meditation. My mind just, well, but the music, I can do that. Nature is also an incredible form of meditation. I'm lucky to live near the ocean. So I walk along that at least 6 days a week. It's about a 2 mile-ish walk. And whatever I have in my head that may be, weird or whatever, by the time I get back, it's gone. Because I look at the ocean and I realize source, and then I realize that it's just the mind that doesn't exist and the ego that doesn't exist, and brings me back to reality.
It's so lovely, isn't it? Especially being from the Midwest here, where it's a few days drive. Now living part of the time in Denmark on a very small island, roll out of bed and go right to the seashore. It probably take the rest of my life to get used to that, or where that's not compelling to me, So if I can, I'd like to transition to now the music industry itself, because I don't get to, like I said earlier, I don't get to talk to so many people. Now you mentioned just vaguely how stressful it can be, especially at that caliber. And how the stress isn't really worth it, or it's worth it for a time, maybe. But I would like you to elaborate a little bit, if you can, on that, especially being practical, giving advice to anyone that may be listening to this that is can either considering trying to go to that level of music. I know the whole industry and game has changed a little bit, I guess. But these levels still exist, and so what kind of other advice would you give? And I've actually heard some claims in that the whole industry, or parts of the industry, depending on where it is and who's interacting with it, it could be quite nefarious too. It goes beyond just standard worldly stress. Like, hear claims of people doing, and it's just things I've heard. I have no idea if this is credible or not. People doing, certain rituals around albums, people that involved in like different types of cults and occult practices, and doing things for worldly power and control, especially like different types of mind control, involved in all kinds of different programming and things like this. So I wondered if what would make sense and what would feel wise and comfortable to mention about any of this?
Well, when the internet came along, they you can now be found on the internet. The problem with that is they don't Spotify pays you shit. Streaming doesn't pay you much money. There's some people that do a relatively okay living with it, but it's not like it used to be. Back when I started, if you had a record album, you were a big deal. Now a 14-year-old can take his cell phone, go into a gym, take 6,000 Instagram things of his newly developed bicep and whistle, and suddenly the whole thing is all over the world. And he's getting millions of followers and he's selling his this and his that. So that's the difference. I've never liked the business. I've always liked the music, but I did well. If I had to do it over again, I would enjoy the ride way more. I would figure out what I was able to do that would make it easier, and I would get a job. I'd get something that I liked that brought in income so I didn't have to worry where money was coming from. Because for me in my career, I either had a lot of it or I had nothing. And of course, I had some savings, but it's a constant thing. So, I would have probably been a psychologist because I like this kind of work and created music because you can do both now. And I think that musicians are now getting sick and tired of people like Spotify. And they're developing co-ops. And we'll distribute our own music. And instead of getting a penny a play, we're going to get whatever, $1 a play. And we're going to distribute it and we're going to connect each other with playing venues. And it's going to eventually leave people like Spotify in the dust. I think for a good bit, the same thing's going to happen with AI. AI is great for certain things, but when I get on the phone with an insurance company and I have to listen to this idiot thing, I tell them about it. I'm hardcore. Even in a doctor's office, I went into an appointment and I went up and I got the office manager and I said, I don't want to have to listen to this crap. I'm calling about my health. Can't you have the decency? And everybody knows this. Everybody knows this. What's doing it is the corporate. Corporate owns a lot of things. But if corporate starts losing their people, if no one's listening to if AI is taking all the jobs, no one's going to have any money to buy their shit. That's just how it works. So it's a hard thing. On the other side of the coin, if you love it, do it. Now, I don't play bars. I've always done just concerts, but a lot of people like playing bars and they like just jamming. You don't have to make a big deal about it. But if you do make a big deal about it, it's a business. So you have to constantly be on social media and you have to be touring. You have to sell merchandise. That's the only way to do it. And, it was an interesting ride for me, but I would do it very differently. And I worried all the time. Could I get booked here? Could I, and I worked hard. And some of the times I had were amazing. They were wonderful. And, times that weren't. But you got to keep feeding the wood stove in the middle of winter all the time to keep the heat on. So I would, if someone came to me and said, well, I want to do what you do, what do you think? I'd say, well, if you don't have the money, get a job, have some income coming in, and then work it on the side. And if it gets big enough, if you want to take it over. But I see the future of this world once we get past all this political crap of being more like a commune because these old nutballs are dying off. And the young people, power means something different to them. Power, it means freedom. And when the trillionaires eventually figure out that having $1 trillion doesn't mean anything anymore. I thought when I had 1 million, I was rich. If I don't have 1 million now, but even if I did, it's like, oh, yeah, well, so what?
Yeah,
it's
the
nuts. It's great.
a rain of gold will never be enough. We'll
Yeah.
always want more in some sense. And even those huge trillionaires, I find they have to get more savvy and how they can keep their power. So they'll have to either change or not. They'll
Yeah.
have to figure out how to appeal to the new crowds. And innovative, and they have way more resources to hire the people to figure out how to do that. So I don't know if it's going to be that easy, but I do know what you're saying. That ideally, if humans didn't have to do all the stuff in the world they didn't want to do, then that would free up a bunch of time for things they did. But there's also something to be said about, well, why not you just do that now? And like you're saying on the side, for an income, that's pretty good advice, I feel. And you said, how are they going to buy the corporate's crap? And I've heard this thing about universal basic income, which seems okay in some sense, but then some other people say, well, that's just going to get siphoned up by the same corporations that people are trying, because they've already pushed out so many mom and pop shops that pretty much almost just all corporations anyway. So I don't know if it would really change that much because the same corporations would get this, would still get the money because people would still buy stuff through them, even with universal basic income. So no easy solutions, but I like where your heart's at with that. And I totally agree. I don't think we came here to slave away for somebody else getting rich just to have her basic needs met. But then again, I don't think socialism and communism is going to work either. So there's so much we have to work on the. I mean, the world's always going to be the way the world is. I think where it comes in for me is this internal thing. So when I'm okay with myself and I work on myself, well then the world around me changes, so to speak, or now I have the more wisdom and I can see more choices and I can better relate and respond instead of me being reactionary as well, and yeah, it can help others when I have the resources to do it. The other thing I was curious about this is a kind of a standard maybe music question is how did you get your foot in the door? Was there like a talent agent like the old school ones where somebody went to one of your gigs and they saw you and they offered you a record contract, or did you have friends? Did you hire an agent, or does it matter? It's okay not to mention this either, but
Well, I saw the Dulcimer when I was 14, and I knew when I saw it that it was going to be my magic carpet ride through my life. So it's not like falling in love, but you don't know why, but it's just there. And I also knew that I would be when I was very, very young. I was very musically gifted, and I was very spiritually drawn from the get-go. Um, so that's what my whole thing has always been about. But I loved Peter, Paul, and Mary and Joni Mitchell, and I thought to myself, well, if I could do music and then get rich and famous, I won't have any problems. But I guess I need a record deal. So I sent a tape to Folkway Records, who had Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger, and Mo, who ran the company, knew that there was something different with my playing, and we did 10 records together. And then I, by fluke, got into children's family music, and then I started to make a real living.
yeah, let's talk about that. The big hit. I had to look this up, and I vaguely remember that on television as a kid. And then, of course, didn't it turn into the Thomas the Train franchise? And my only nephew was really into that. And then there was a big star like Ringo Starr was on there, and I forget who. So if you just, I'm sure you've told this a million times, but I haven't heard it. That whole story and how that came about.
Well, I had made an album called Lullabies for Little Dreamers, and Rick Siggelko, who was the producer of Shining Time, used to put his daughter to bed with it every night. And they needed someone to sing the theme song, and who they had tried to get didn't work out. So he contacted me, and that's how it happened. I did not write the song. Everyone says I wrote it, but Joe Raposa wrote it. And it was initially out of my vocal range. But back then I was working with a superb vocal teacher, and we figured out how I could hit the high notes. And I went into New York, and I think I did two, maybe three takes. And then the show came out. Originally, it starred Ringo. Then I think it went to George Carlin and a few other people. And it just went zoom. And what that did, and I also wrote music videos for it, by the way. There's four music videos. One's called, I think, Thanksgiving, and there's one for Christmas. There's four altogether. But the show is, I was just talking about, well, I talk about this really in every podcast, but the show is, I think, even bigger now. It's a cult hit. There's it has a charm and an innocence to it that you don't find anywhere. It had puppets. It had a good lesson. It was good-hearted, and people love trains, especially boys. They love trains. And what it did for me professionally is then I could call any concert hall that had family programming. Most did because that's part of their grant funding. And I said, I sing the theme to Shining Time Station and let's do a show together. Didn't matter if I was Kevin Roth or not, because they could sell tickets. So that's what it's about. And
Right on. Oh, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, what I find fascinating, it was a long time ago. And generations have grown up listening to my music, and that's very surreal because I'm not like into fame or, I'm not now into fame, but I'm meeting all these people that, are older and, they have the recordings from Shining Time and they remember my voice and I'm this inner heartbeat for them. And it's like I say, it happened in spite of myself. It was like, how did this happen? But this was part of the karmic destiny.
Famous John Prine song, "In Spite of Ourselves," too.
Yeah.
But I just think about how many theme songs I've heard throughout my life, and how many people I don't know that were involved with those. You know what I mean? But
Mhm.
how, like, on maybe on a subconscious level, it affects us. And paints a broader, like, social conditioning and social container that so many of us can relate to, and actually how important that can be on subtle levels, and it matters. And did you ever have a lot of singing experience leading up to that, or like, yeah, I see the connection of why he chose you, but like, and then afterwards, and how does that compare to playing dulcimer or not? And then you said you made music videos. What do you mean? Did you envision those? Did you write a plot to it? Did you just do the music for it? What do you mean by that?
During the television show, they had music videos as part of the show. And so for four of those episodes, they sent me the script and I wrote the music and sang it. So that's how that happened. What were your other questions? Because there was a lot
Oh,
of,
sorry, the singing.
well, of course I had sung for Folkways from the age I was 16. And then I started my own record label, my own publishing business, and started the children's music thing. I had a little push up the road because one little tiny independent label signed me before I started a company. And then they went under. But what they left was all my masters, and they left a whole bunch of distributors. So now I could just call the distributors and say, you carry this record. And now I'm on my own label, and I just sold to them, which was wonderful business. But I didn't get serious into singing until about my third Folkways album. And it was probably due to hearing that Judy Collins, who's one of my favorite singers, had been studying voice. And I thought, oh, okay, because I was trying to imitate her in that way. And I found a great voice teacher. But she was very spiritual, although we never talked about it. But good singing is very meditative and very spiritual.
Yeah, it's such a kind of a curiosity, and it was a huge fascination for me in the past. Not maybe not so much anymore, because basically I'm tone deaf and atonal. So it's just like, how can they do that? And it's so beautiful and angelic and lovely, and yeah. So it was a source of admiration and fascination and mystery for me. When I was more into music. So yeah, I don't where I'm coming from. So yeah. Well, I think maybe this might be a good place to start winding up. why don't you tell people how they can get in touch with you? Maybe what and work with you. Maybe what kind of things you have in the works coming up. Any kind of other products or services, or just anything in general you want to draw people's attention to, and then take everybody out, the listeners and I and viewers out on a final message, please.
Well, I'm actually working on a new book. It's called Come Sit Down. I have something I want to talk to you about. That was something that my father used to say to me on the rare occasions that it was serious stuff. And when my father died, he came back to me. There's all kinds of things I talk about in the book, how, but in brief, I was waiting for a medical test back before I was diagnosed. And it hadn't come back, and it didn't come back. And on a Sunday night, I was looking at a photograph of him and myself. We were very close. And as if he were in the room, he said, "You're going to hear tomorrow, and it's going to be really bad. It's going to be bad, and it's going to be tough. But you're going to be okay. But it's going to be very, very rough." And the next morning at 9 o'clock, the doctor called. So I discovered that whenever I need to get advice, I just need to ask him. And I get the advice. Now, whether I'm nuts or whether I'm just used to what he would tell me, whatever it is works. So, in order to talk about non-duality and Buddhism and quantum physics and what's real and what's not real, and why I do what I do, the book is about that. It's about, you know, these are my experiences. Now, maybe 20 years ago, people would say, "Oh, he's office rocker." Today, I think everyone's on board with it. So there's that project. And the reason I'm coming out with it as a PDF and not a physical book is because I want to include some music with it. So you'll pay me $20 or whatever it is, and I'll send you the thing, and you'll get the music links, and there it is. So that's one project. I'm always writing sort of Dulcimer instrumentals, just for the joy of it. I don't give any concerts anymore. If people want to work with me, and especially if they mention that they heard me on your program, I'll give them a free session. So you just go to my website, kevinroth.org, and we'll have a discovery session on Zoom. That's what I use. I work with very few people because they become family, and very selective. But the people who I work with, we have a lot of fun because I think a lot of things are pretty ridiculous. So we have a lot of laughs, and people have been with me a long time. So, but I'm always happy to help people. I'm not inexpensive, and if that part didn't work out, there's lots of places I'm happy to send you to. So that's pretty fulfilling, and then I'm always kind of working on myself. I'm trying to, because when you're an artist, you think a lot, and so I'm cooking, walking on the beach, hanging out with my dog a lot, and that's pretty much what I do. That's the whole thing.
Well, right on, Kevin. I just want to say it's what a great good fortune you have for having such a good relationship with your father. I mean, there's a lot of us who say that we're still very much at work on that,
Mm.
So very fortunate. So with that, I think we'll leave the wrap up the show and say, may you all find your highest happiness and well-being for yourselves and for others, and may all beings everywhere realize awakening and be free. Bye, everybody.